Hello, I'm Matt Noble here with Gold Derby, joining Paul W. Downs, Lucia Aniello, and Jen Statsky, the creators, showrunners, EPs, writers, and directors of the new comedy about comedies, Hacks. And I'll start off by asking you, Lucia, what was the most important thing about the show when you guys
that it got made. I mean, you know, I think we wanted to make something that felt real and authentic in every way. So, you know, you said it's a comedy about comedy, and that's true. And so for us, for example, when we were going to be writing jokes, stand-up jokes for a comedian, we wanted them to feel genuinely funny. And when we were doing, you know, more dramatic moments, we wanted that to feel real too. And for us, I think authenticity is always going to kind of be our North Star. And, you know, making a show that I think it maybe, you know, toes the line of comedy and drama, but it always felt to us, I think, as long as it feels real, that's our North Star.
Paul, what was the biggest challenge for you guys in finding that realness of the show?
I would say probably the global pandemic, COVID-19. That was a challenge. You know, it was, we obviously have Jean Smart at the helm, who is such a gifted actor, but she's a diabetic and she's also, you know, in her late 60s. And so it was something that we had to obviously make sure that our set and our crew and all of our actors were very, very safe. So I think that was probably the biggest challenge for us in making the show, because, you know, when you're on camera, I didn't have a mask on, but when we're off camera, we have 2 masks and a shield, and a COVID team making sure everyone's socially distanced. So I think that was a challenge, but hopefully it's an escape for people. And you can't tell that it was made during the global pandemic when you watch.
Jen, what was the biggest sort of joy in making the show?
What was the biggest joy in making the show?
Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So I think the biggest joy is this show is about a collaboration between 2 people creatively. And for me, the greatest joy of this show was getting to creatively collaborate with Paul and Lucia, who are my 2 best friends and also just longtime collaborators. And so I think it was really lovely that, you know, there's a line in our show that says, when you share a sense of humor with someone, you make each other better. And I think every day we felt that in the writing, pre-production, production, post-production, we felt, I'll speak for myself, I felt that these guys made me better at every step of the way. And that is the biggest joy of the show.
I agree. I concur.
Yeah. Oh, it's lovely. And I guess what is, do you reckon, a moment where you guys shared the sense of humor? Sort of like, is there a particular joke or moment where you just all like sort of clicked on the most in the series? I don't mind who answers this.
There's one joke I will say in episode 5 when Deborah Vance is a little bit drunk. I might maybe I'll
spoiler. Yeah,
okay, so she's a little tipsy and she runs into Hannah's character Ava, who says, "Oh, you can't say that I'm bisexual," right? She's essentially like, "Oh, you can't go around saying I'm bisexual," and she says, "Well, Roman Polanski is still feasting on foie gras on the 6th. I can say my bisexual employee has bisex." And to me, that's what this show is. It's that line. And if you like that line, you should watch the show.
And wait till you hear Jean perform it. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Does anyone have another moment or they want to throw in there?
You know, this is gonna sound, I don't mean to be saccharine, but like I don't know, we're very on the same page comedically, the 3 of us. It's very rare that there's something one of us thinks is funny or pitches and the other 2 are like, "What are you talking about?" Like it doesn't really happen. Like we obviously, there's creative disagreements and stuff, but like when it comes to just our sensibility, like we're pretty very on the same page, I would say. Unless they absolutely want to contradict.
No.
What you talking about?
Well, I will say no. It's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you all on the same page? Are we like to have agreement there?
Yes.
Yes.
Was there though anything you disagreed about when creating the show and putting it all together, or in the writers' room? What was there something that you sort of had to sort of nut out and sort of figure out?
I mean, I think it happens all the time where somebody be like, oh, you need this moment or you need this joke or something. But what's really nice about 3 showrunners is that we get to vote, and it doesn't really go too far beyond that. It's like, it's really easy. And in that way, it's actually, because Paul and I sometimes will write as well, just as a team. And sometimes, you're at a loggerheads and you don't really have a way to break the tie. But the number 3 is a beautiful thing for writing, for real.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think everybody, I've never ever been in a writer's room that didn't have some amount of like, people have different artistic points of view, but there's nothing on this show that was ever anything more than just like a joke or moment or something that it was really, like Jen said, it's so absolutely minor. And truth be told, like, we're all perfectionists. We all are really passionate. We all really care about the show. And so if anything, when we do have like any slight disagreements, it's only because we really, really care and we're so obsessed with the details. And so, I mean, I think if any group of writers are constantly agreeing, they don't care enough.
Paul, did you want to add something?
I was going to say that I think actually, it's connected to what Lucia said in the beginning, which is because we wanted this to feel authentic and real and grounded. I think that was the only time that we would ever debate things was, does this feel real? Does it feel lived in? Would a local news helicopter pick up this woman in the desert? There are things like that, but I think everything you see in the show, we did come to a consensus on. And I don't even think there's anything that's not in the show that.
No.
Yeah.
There's nothing that like one of us wanted desperately and then the other 2 vetoed. No. Yeah.
So there's probably like one joke that's like, you got your joke that you love, and we all know what those are for each other, but it would bore your
never
readers.
tell.
Yeah. I guess it's so funny because like at the heart of the show in some ways is Ava and Deborah, who are not on the same page for a lot of the show. They're at very different places. Like, what was important for you guys in sort of approaching that relationship in the show? 2 characters that are so different in sort of how they see the world, but at the same time sort of united in a confidence about their way of seeing the world. Jen?
That's a great question. One thing we talked a lot about is that we never wanted one of them to be 100% right and the other to be 100% wrong, because I think that could quickly devolve into just a show where one character is lecturing the other, especially when it's like an intergenerational thing. So we were very careful, I think, to always, whenever they are disagreeing, we would call them POV clashes, which isn't like, it was just about 2 characters with very different points of view, but one of them is not 100% right and one of them is not 100% wrong. And so it is a very like crucial element of the show, and hopefully as you see the relationship grows, they start to meet each other in the middle, they start taking things from the other's perspectives. But yeah, that was kind of something we obviously, as it's at the heart of the show, is these 2 women butting heads and disagreeing and then learning to see each other's perspective. So yeah, it was intentional what you're picking up on.
And also in episode 102, when the antiques dealer says, you think you're different than Deborah Vance, you're both psychotic. They do have some things in common.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, it's partly the reason that they do butt heads is because they're both very strong-willed.
Yep.
They're very opinionated, but I think they also see a bit of themselves in each other, especially Deborah, who sees this young woman in the beginning of the pilot who's bold enough to give it back to her. And I think that kindredness, while they recognize it, is something that only later in the season they really start to enjoy. And that, I think, speaks to why the show is very personal to us, because like Jen said, we have had this collaboration for so long creatively. And I think no matter what your art is, artistic collaboration is a weird love language. And so they do develop that as the season goes.
And is Deborah Vance based off any comedian?
Not one person in particular, but I mean, we researched a lot of different women, but she isn't even just a stand-up. I mean, there's women like Elaine May and Carrie Fisher.
Debbie Reynolds,
yeah, Debbie Reynolds, and Elaine Boozler and Joan Rivers, and just there's so many women who we think who work so hard and were never really given their due as incredible artists the way that maybe their male counterparts had. And so that was part of the inspiration for us is to say, this is what it's like to be a woman who had to forge her own path. And it's not easy. And through Ada's eyes, we hope the audience gains the appreciation for what it was like for women of a certain age, especially in the entertainment industry. Because we just stand on the shoulders of them, and through Ava's point of view, we start to respect them for what they did for us.
And like, what do you think this sort of show helps in sort of providing commentary on women in comedy, and sort of, I guess, two elements, the sort of thing that it can be more challenging for women to reach the same heights as men in comedy, or there's more hurdles that have to be overcome, and also the way that maybe sort of conflict and rivalry between women in the comedic world is sort of viewed. Like, I don't mind who answers this, but how did you approach those sort of issues in the show?
I think the man should answer.
That's so funny. I truly, once you said women, I tuned out. I didn't even listen to the question. I said they're going to get it.
I think we, in episode, you've seen the first 6, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I think like in episode, oh gosh, that's an 8. Never mind. I was just going to say you meet
Good tease.
Yeah,
you meet somebody
Oh,
who actually did do stand up when Deborah did stand up, another woman. And actually there's no rivalry there. They actually helped each other then, and they actually bonded and kind of used each other's support systems back in the, I guess it would be in the 80s technically when that storyline happened. But I think for us, it's really more about women coming together than it is about any rivalries. And in terms of what it was like for women then and how much harder it was and how much harder it can still be today. I mean, even when we were doing improv, 15 years ago in New York, there would, be improv teams that were mostly all men, and there'd be maybe one woman if you were lucky. So all the women had to pretty much compete for that one spot, while pretty much any guy who was wearing a hoodie could get on the team. So, that was not that long ago. So I don't think things have dramatically changed, but I hope they've changed a little bit. And if this show gives people a little bit of a perspective of what that experience may have been for a woman like Deborah Vance, and that's great. But I'm not sure we necessarily came at it from, here's how we want to portray this. We really tried to come at it honestly through characters and experiences, and tried to make that authentic as possible.
Yeah. Any of you, Paul or Jen, do you have anything you want to add on that?
Ladies first.
Yeah, I think Lucia said it beautifully. No rivalry here.
No.
And yeah, I do think, it's such an interesting thing. Lucia and I met in 2007. We were the only 2 women on this sketch group with all men. And I think what's happened is, in Deborah's time, you'd be the only girl in this group. And in our time, you're one of 2.
And guess what? They kicked us both out.
So I think things are getting better incrementally for women, but I think it's still a journey and a struggle. And like Lucia said, this isn't necessarily us trying to make a grand sweeping statement about that. We really tried to just tell these authentic stories of these 2 women who happen to be, it's an intergenerational relationship. But yeah, I think that obviously it is saying something about what it's like for both of these women to have come up in this industry.
Yeah. And I guess I'll just add that not just in comedy, but I think just in entertainment in general. That's why, referencing people like Debbie Reynolds, who's one of her husbands, everything was in his name. And so when they divorced, she realized she was out of luck and had no property and no money. I think that there's a lot of stories of women who not only were undervalued and underappreciated, but because of just the way of the world, were fully mistreated. And I think we're in a moment now where there is a real reckoning for the way in which certain characters in popular culture or in real culture were treated. And so I do think that hopefully this show through the eyes of Ava, gives the perspective of women like Deborah Vance, who went through a lot and who may not be considered cool, but are often overlooked, sometimes until you read their obituary. And then you're like, wow, that person did all of these things. I had no idea that that person endured what they endured and were part of the canon of whatever the art form is, because nobody talked about it.
Yeah, whether that's entertainment industry or art or government or a million different, industries, I feel like that is something that as a culture we are reckoning with, like Paul said.
As people who are involved,
Hilarious, right?
No, go.
Sorry, I just was making a dumb joke.
Oh, okay. As people who are involved in the process of putting this show together, from the very inception of the series to through to directing the episodes, and then obviously then viewing the episodes, what is it like to sort of involve every step on the way in that process, and what's sort of been the challenges in taking the show from an idea to a sort of reality? Paul.
Well, I don't know if we said this already to you, but we came up with the idea for the show when we were on a road trip to Portland, Maine to go to a Monster Jam monster truck show because we were filming my Netflix special. And it was on that road trip we started talking about, women like Deborah Vance, and the idea came up. And that was 5 years ago. So we've been talking about the idea, but luckily we've been fortunate enough to have been working on other things. And it was only, a couple of years ago that we were really able to devote our time to it. Even though every time we hang out, it was something that we just kept coming up with ideas for and pitching on and making jokes about. But we were really lucky in that HBO Max really got the show, really supported the show. And so from the time that the show was picked up to being made was really actually quite quick. Yeah. We've been editing as we've been shooting. And so we just wrapped very recently, and yet it's going to be on air, as you know, on May 13th. I think,
And I think in terms of, like, as you asked about every step of the way, I think, the more people that you bring onto the project, whether it's department heads or actors,
other writers.
Yeah, or other writers, you really have to kind of explain the vision for it. And as they add their vision to it, you start to create a bigger vision and still trying to keep a North Star for the entire project. It really is about constant communication. And I think a big, barrier to that is the fact that so much of that was over Zoom, and, all your department head meetings are over Zoom, and we didn't really have time for rehearsals because it would have been, when we had table reads, but, I think the added mask and shield of this whole process, it does make it a challenge for sure. Even the whole writer's room was over Zoom. I mean, the three of us were together, but the other writers were over Zoom. And so, I think there's pros and cons to it. It certainly was the first time we ever made a show during the global pandemic. So, and I think
hopefully the last time we do a pandemic show.
First season of any show, I think, can be a challenge because you're still figuring it out together. But I mean, it's, I think, still so much of what we originally intended. We were on that road trip is still what I think ended up on the screen today. And so, or May 13th. So I think, we're really, really proud of what we were able to pull off under the circumstances. And I hope when people watch it, they have no idea. And that it's just really like a fun escapist show that, you laugh a lot and you feel a lot.
Last question, Jen. If someone asked you, what would you say to what is Hacks?
What is Hacks?
What isn't Hacks?
That's what I was. Lucia gave the answer for me. What isn't Hacks?
Well,
we'll say that. Yeah.
I didn't mean to actually answer.
Sorry. What would I say?
I mean, it. That's good.
We jokingly call it a psychosexual relationship between two women. But
yes,
that's a joke. It's a story of a friendship between two people who really need each other, who meet each other at a time when they really need each other.
Yeah, sounds good. Paul, Lucia, Jen, thank you so much for talking with us today about Hacks.
Thanks, Matt.
No worries. And for people watching this interview, you can go to goldderby.com where you can make your own awards predictions and watch other interviews with award contenders. And all the best of luck for the Emmy Awards, guys. this year.
Oh, thank
so
you.
much. Thank you.
No worries.
Take care.
Bye.
Okay.